Good morning, everybody. We are doing another Facebook Live video today from my broom cupboard at home, my studio. And today we're going to be looking at using moulds with metal clay. So how to make moulds, how to use them, how I use them, and just give you some tips and tricks really. So we'll just give people a chance to sign up. We'll get a few more people signed up and then I will get started. Okay. Great. Morning. Morning, Jan. Morning, Mum. My regulars. Okay, I think I'm going to get started because there's a lot that I want to show you actually. So my name's Amy Surman. I run the Oxford Bead Shop in Oxford and Amy Surman School of Jewellery. We specialise in silversmithing, metal clay and beading. So today, for one of my Facebook Live tutorials today, we are going to be looking at moulds and metal clay. So how to combine them. So the moulding compound that we use is this stuff, silly gum. Okay, now I know a few of you have been buying this and I just got mine off of Amazon, to be honest. You can get a pot this size and I think it's about 12 to 14 pounds, something like that. So that's what you can buy. It's a 2-part moulding compound. So what you will do is first you need to decide, let's go back a step. First, you need to decide what it is that you want to mould. So let's talk about what can and can't be moulded. So you obviously need something that's going to hold its shape as you push it in. And you also need something that doesn't have an undercut. Okay, now what I mean by an undercut, and I've got a pad here that I'm going to draw it on for you. What I mean by an undercut is, if I were to push the piece into the moulding compound, I need to be able to take that out without it getting stuck. But more important, you would probably be able to pull it out of the moulding compound anyway because it's flexible. But what you need to be able to do is to pull it out of the PMC once you used it, pull that out without damaging it. So if we had something that was that shape, really basic image there, morning, really basic image. But if we had something that we pushed in to mould, which would go into the mould, but then the moulding compound were to come round, this bit here would be known as an undercut. Okay, so be careful of that. So sometimes you have these kind of cabochons. It's dark so you can't see it, but it's got like all of a flower detail on there. If you were to push that into the mould, sometimes where the flowers are, there's little undercuts like this, which means when you then use your PMC in the mould, if you were to then pull it out, it wouldn't pull out neatly. It would distort it and it would damage what you're trying to create. So be careful of undercuts. Okay, so that's the first thing to think about. I also mentioned that you need something that's going to withstand being pushed into the silly gum. Now, even though the moulding compound, the silly gum, is very soft, if you tried to push, say, a leaf in, you probably wouldn't be able to get it even, and again you'd probably distort it as you did it. Now I have got leaves that I've made moulds from, but what I've actually done here is I've made up the leaf using the other process that you can use, another process that you can use with metal clay, and that's using the paste form to create a leaf. And I have got a tutorial of that if you look back through the videos, using metal clay paste. So you could make that piece up, fire it, finish it, and then you could take a mould of it. So I use this in some of my designs. Like some designs I will have leaves that I've made, like we talked about in our other tutorial. Okay, this one's not been polished yet. but I will have leaves that I've made by applying the paste. Now the thing is with that, it's wonderful because you can get these one-off leaves, but obviously from a selling point of view, sometimes you need to keep the making hours down to keep the price down. So this is a great way of doing that. Okay, so making a mold, because it does mean that you've got less making time in there. So looking at, so being careful of the product that you're pushing in being strong enough to take being pushed in, and also undercuts. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can take little charms and you can push those in. Now, what I tend to do if I push in a little charm like that is I will cut off the little loop at the top. Okay, because I won't necessarily want loops on them. So I will cut the little loop off. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. I'm taking just a pair of side cutters. I'm going to snip the end off there. Make sure, see how I cut it into there so that little piece doesn't fly off. You see that? So you always cut it with the flat side against your piece, and then you can cover this with your finger. Okay, now I just want to file that round a little bit there. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to file it. I'm just doing it with a nail file. The reason I'm doing it off to the side is because I don't want any of this metal over my workspace. So be careful of that. Also, if you were using jewellery files that you use for your metal clay, for instance, don't make sure it's really clean. I mean, I'm just going to use this board for just doing this and any others that I do, because you don't want to cross-contaminate. What you don't want to do is be working on something like this, then use it on your metal clay and embed this metal into your metal clay. Don't want to do that. So, same as if you're working with sterling silver. If you've got sterling silver needle files, don't use them on your metal clay. Have separate needle files because you'll cross-contaminate. There. So I've just rounded that off a little bit, and now I've got my little charm without a loop at the top, okay? Right, so let's go into looking at the moulding compound then, because then that needs to spend sort of 5 or 10 minutes to cure. It's only going to be a small little charm, this one. So I'm going to take a little ball of the white, and I'm going to take a little ball of the blue, of the same size. So I want the same size in both. Okay, so that's about right. So let's pop the lids back on there. Make sure that you keep your lids on, otherwise it does kind of dry out a little bit actually. There we go. Okay, equal amounts of both. Then what we do is we mix it together. So I'm just going to work it together. For those of you that have joined late, remember that you'll be able to watch this video back to get the first bit that you've missed, either on here or my other Facebook page, or on YouTube. Okay, so I will upload it to YouTube. All right, there we go. Look, so we've got an even colour, no marbling. You want all the marbling to have gone. Okay, so there we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop it down onto my mat there. Just push it down a little bit. And then I can take my mould. I don't know which way I want it to go actually, because this one is indented there. You'll get exactly what you push in. I think I want it that way, so I'm going to push it in that way. Ooh, let's just move it into the middle. Okay, and then I'm going to push that in. So you just push down, and then I'm just gently going to push the moulding compound up around the outside, just so I can make sure that I've got a really good shape. And then I leave that for about 5 or 10 minutes, okay? All right, so we're going to leave that one there. So here's some others that I've made. So that was a little mould. And you see, I've used that as detail in some other pieces. Can you see that there? Morning, Kathy. Yeah, look, see this one? That's that. I also use that in little stud earrings that I do. I'm going to post all these up. All right, so and I've used it again in that design, and I've got my little ladybird there. So that was a charm. The little flower was a charm that I took the loop off. The ladybird was actually an earring of my nan's. So I've just taken a little mould of that. You can do shells. Shells are great. People always ask me whether shells can go in the kiln, and they can't. They don't burn away, so you can't combine them with metal clay. So if you want to make shells, you need to do it using this method with the moulds. Buttons. And this was a beautiful button. Look at that one, gorgeous. And you get such a nice detail, and it really shows up the detail in things as well when you do it. All sorts of different ones there. Okay, so that's how you would get it set up there. The other thing that you can do, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about stone setting actually, because one of the things that moulds are quite good for is it gives you a depth for setting stones. I will do a whole tutorial about this, but just to cover it briefly, the stones that I'm going to talk to you about today and show you are these. They're brilliant cut stones. So you can see how it's got the point on the back there. Okay, so here we have, oh, let me just get that open. So this is our stone. Okay, that's our stone. Now, when you're setting stones in PMC, because it has a certain amount of shrinkage when you fire it, you need to make sure that that widest point of the stone here is set underneath the surface of PMC. So this line here is called the girdle line. Like I said, I'm not going to go into masses of detail here. I will do another tutorial for you about this. This is called the girdle line. The girdle line is the widest point of the stone. So if a stone is described as 5 millimeters, it's talking about the diameter of the girdle line. I briefly mentioned then, when PMC fires, it shrinks. Now, if your girdle line wasn't underneath the surface of PMC, when it fired, it would pop the stone out. But if you're making something like a big pendant like this, for instance, see all the little layers that I've got there, and I've got the stone in the middle. That's a 5 mil stone. So if you were just pushing your stone into metal clay, which is the easiest way of setting stones, is just to literally push it into the clay, then you would need to make this very, very thick to accept the depth of that stone, okay? To make sure that the girdle line is sat underneath the surface. So one way that you can do it is by using a mould and a stone that fits well to that mould, and you can just push that into the surface once you've made your mould. So this little one here, I use this little ammonite a lot in my designs. I use it, look, I've got my little earrings there. Very, very popular design of mine, this one, with the little ammonite earrings. But what I've done here with these ones that haven't been fired yet, can you see there's a little stone in there? So I've just pushed a tiny little 3 mil stone. So I sell these stones in all different colours and different sizes. Some colours don't react as well to the heat as others, but the purples work really well with heat, any of the reds and any of the whites. So if you wanted to try any of those, then I've got these at the, I sell these at the shop. All right, I'm just going to show you that. I'm just going to show you one of those quickly. So what we do is take a little bit of our lump. So this is what we're going to use for the moulds. We use the lump form. You don't use the paste form, you use the lump form. So I'm going to take a little bit. Now remember, if we're starting to work with this clay, then we're going to put a little bit of balm on our hands to stop us from sticking to the clay and drawing the moisture out of the clay. Okay, so I'm going to take a tiny little bit of this out. The other thing that's really good with using moulds is that when you get to the end of a pack and it's drying up and it's being put into the pack and back out and used and into the pack, and it's starting to dry up and it's not got much life left back in it, it's great just to use it up on a mould. So I always have a set of moulds that I can use for exactly that purpose, because once things are dry, it doesn't matter how long it takes before you use them. There's my tiny little ball of clay there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop it into my mould, okay? Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to wrap this back up because we don't want it to dry out. And then I'm going to push that into the mould there. Now, when you're pushing into the mould, you only want it inside the mould. What you don't want is it all spilling over the side, because it's a waste. You're going to end up filing it off and you'll end up with dust rather than clay that you can use. So if you've put that in and you find that there's too much in there, take it out, take a little bit off and push it back in. You can do that a few times, but you have to be careful that you don't dry the clay out by handling it too much. It's a really good idea, if you've not watched my other videos, to watch them, especially the basics of working with metal clay, which I did quite a few weeks ago, but it's all listed on YouTube. So have a little look at that, because that will give you some more tips of working with the clay and handling it. But you see how it fits perfectly inside the mould. Then what we can do is I can just take that, I'm flexing the mould, look, you see that? So sometimes what I'll do is I'll flex the mould to just release it around the edge, and then I'll just pop that out like so. Okay, so here's my little stone, tiny little 3mm cubic zirconia. Now, cubic zirconias are made under a high heat, so they withstand the temperature of the kiln and the torch. Again, I will go into more detail in another video about that. So I'm going to take my tweezers. I need to get this position so the point is facing down. So it sometimes can be a little bit of a fiddle to do, but I get it in between my finger and thumb there, and then I can hold it right on that girdle line like so. Can you see? Point down, okay? And then I'm going to pop the point into the middle of my ammonite, and I'm going to squeeze it down, just push it down into there, making sure that the girdle line is underneath the surface. I don't know how well you can see this, everybody, but can you see that I've pushed that in? There we go. I'll put some pictures up for you to see afterwards. All right? So that's great. So it means then I can let that dry like I have with these, and I can use those within other designs. And I would just use paste to paste it together. So you use paste to paste everything together. Okay, so what we're going to do, so I'll let that dry now. So when you're drying out your moulded pieces, it's surprising how long they will take to dry if you just left them to dry, just to air dry, or even if you put them on a radiator, because especially if you've got something that's quite big. I mean, if you imagine if I were to do this shell, this part here is quite thick, so actually it would look dry from the outside, but it'd still be wet inside. So what I would do is I would run it through my kiln or through the oven at 150 degrees for 20 minutes. Then you know that it's dry inside. If it's quite a really thick piece that you've done, then you might want to do it for longer, say 150 degrees for 30 minutes, say, okay, just to make sure that it's dry inside. Because if it's not and you fire it, it won't explode. That's a bit like dramatic, but it will break where the water content and the moisture is coming out of the piece. You'll end up with a split, which can be repaired if that does happen, but fingers crossed it doesn't, because you've dried it out well enough. Right, let's have a little look at our mould. Can you see it down here still? What you will do once you've left it for your 5 or 10 minutes, I'm not quite sure how long we've left it, about that-ish, you do the nail test. So you push your nail into the side of the piece, and if it doesn't show any mark, which it is a little bit actually, it's ready. But I can see a little bit of a mark there, so I'm going to leave it for a little bit longer. And I'm just going to show you some other things as well. Now, I did a poppy head, isn't that nice? I've not used that as a mould yet, actually. So what else can I show you while we wait for that? I've got all sorts of other wonderful things. Look at this. Combining metal clay with ceramic, that works really nicely as well. Do let me know if you've got any questions, anybody, as well, as we go. So yes, let's sort of think about what we've talked about. So we talked about how to prepare a mould. We've talked about how you can make something and then mould it so you can do repeats. So again, the same applies if you were to make something, hand build something out of metal clay that's taken you, a day to do. If you wanted to do repeats, you could take a mould of it. The other thing that people are using this for is to make something and then send it off and have it cast, unless you've got the casting facilities yourself in your studio, but sending things off to casting companies and then getting it cast. Because again, what you're doing there is you're spending the time on one piece, on making one piece, and then to save time and ultimately cost, you can then have them cast. So this is almost a casting process of a kind, really. But remember that these are only going to be one-sided moulds, so they will have a back to them. What I mean by that is when you push the clay in, you're going to have the back that hasn't got the detail on there. Okay, you can do two-part moulds. What you can do is you could put if you've got something that's more three-dimensional, you can put half of it into one part of the mould, okay? So make up your compound and you can push half in. Then you need to wait till that cures, and then you can make another piece and put it on the other side. But just be aware of that undercut that we talked about, okay? The other thing, just as another tip for you that I find, is button moulds like these are really good for making any size pendants. So like these ones, which one is it that I've used? I don't know if I've got it here actually. But what I do with these is you can make little moulds, and look at that tiny little detail on there. That was just a tiny bit that I had left, just pushed into the middle of the mould. So it's quite good for using up any size. It doesn't have to fill the whole mould with things like this. Right, let's try this again. Yep, that's better. So I haven't got any impression on there when I press my nail in. So I can lift it up, it comes off of the surface easily, and then I can just pull that out. And look, there's my little leaf mould now. So I can now take a little piece of clay. Let's have a go with it and see what it looks like. Another thing to mention is if you are using charms and if you are using things that you've bought, you need to be aware of copyright as well. You need to be aware that the piece that you're moulding and using within your work is not copyrighted. That's particularly important if you are making and selling, because you don't want to be moulding somebody else's work that you shouldn't be, really. Okay, so there we go. We'll pop that there. And then I'm going to push that in. Now this one's a little bit more complicated than our ammonite because you've got the kind of the leaves. So this one may need a bit of filing afterwards, but still what I'm doing there is I'm using both fingers to just push it all the way down into that mould. So I am starting with a little bead again, and I'm just pushing it all the way down. Look, see, so it fits perfectly inside. And then if I take it out, I might then need to just go into those little areas just to file it, just to refine the shape a little bit. But that's quite nice, actually. I like that. That'll make a nice little earring. There you go. You'll see those on my website soon as earrings. Okay, so yeah, it's quite nice. Something else, I keep thinking of all these tips to talk to you about. So something else, if you were doing something that was quite long like this, you wouldn't necessarily start off with a bead. So what you could do is just make it into more of a sausage and then push it into the mould. So let me show you how you would do that as well. So I'm going to take another piece. Looks like a unicorn horn. It was a shell. Oh, it's here actually, look. Shell. Double up as a unicorn horn. Okay, so there's my little lump there. And then what I'm going to use is a little piece of perspex like this. And if I roll it from side to side, can you see how I'm making a sausage? See that? So what you can do is you can make it a bit longer so it's kind of starting off to be a bit more the shape that you're looking for when you push it into your mould, rather than trying to push it all the way along, you see. My little niece would like this one. One of them, particularly. Isabel, I think, would like this one. Okay, there we go. All right? I'm not going to keep that one though, so I'm going to wrap that back up and put it into my pack. I think that's everything that I wanted to show you today. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you've got any questions at all, then do let me know on Saturday afternoon. Have a look at the programme. I think it's at 3 o'clock. I'm holding a question and answer session via Zoom. So if anybody wants to join in that, I'm going to send the details of that out so you can come along and join us. Yeah, but it's a great way, using these moulds, it's a really good way of being able to do sort of repeats, really. I think that was everything. So remember the silly gum, you can get that on Amazon. And yeah, have fun. I think some of you that have been buying the PMC kits are going to be having a go this weekend, so I thought I'd put this one in. So yeah, I apologise, today was meant to be about bunting, a copper bunting necklace, which we didn't do, but we'll do that another time. We've got so much to fit in, haven't we? Thanks for joining me, everybody. Have a wonderful VE Day celebration tomorrow. We're going to be having afternoon tea in our front garden with the neighbours, I think. So yeah, everybody stay safe, stay well, and I will see you on Saturday. Take care. Bye.